My name is Eliane Balitaro. I'm the Executive Director of Sustainability in the Digital Age, and I'm really pleased today to be talking to Keroles Riad. And so, Keroles, before we start, can you just let me know and let our viewers know, where are you in your career right now? I know you've reached a very special milestone, and I'd like to congratulate you in advance for that, and just share where you are.
Thank you, Liane. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So my name is Keroles, and I'm a PhD candidate at Concordia University, and I just submitted my PhD thesis a week ago, and hopefully I'll defend in August. So crossing fingers there, but thank you for the kind words.
Thank you. So while you were doing your PhD, you started a really interesting project. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so it's called Waste Not, One Not. And it's essentially a student initiative that started as a collaboration between the university administration and professors and staff. And the idea is that the university would improve the infrastructure in terms of composting, and students would run an education campaign alongside that expansion to help the community at Concordia learn how to compost, sort, and reduce their waste, essentially how to use those new compost bins. And so essentially the main model is to couple top-down infrastructure improvement with broad impact grassroots education. And so we started in 2016, and since then, annual composting at Concordia has doubled, and annual overall waste per person has decreased by 16% per person. So that's the equivalent of 2 months worth of garbage that simply disappeared per person every year. So we're very proud of it. And actually last year, my team and I created a spin-off company that we affectionately call Enough. And our mission is essentially to do whatever it takes to fix the waste crisis. And the idea is that we want to replicate the work that we're doing at Concordia and other places, other universities, other schools, and so on, and scale the impact that we're having beyond just Concordia.
So what you're doing is really interesting, and I think it's a great example of youth engagement and scaling in university, because often a lot of people think, oh, I'm a student, I can't do anything. And so what would you say is your intent in terms of what you're bringing into this space?
So I mean, what we want is to help people understand that they have a lot of power, a lot of influence in this. This is a principle of credible empowerment that we need to promote. And so it was really important for us, for example, at the beginning is to report regularly the progress that the community is doing. So we always report how much Concordia is composting, how much is recycling, and how much waste is being reduced, because there's a lot of anxiety out there because of the sheer magnitude, scope, and urgency of the climate crisis. And a lot of people feel rightly that they don't have a lot of influence, a lot of say in any of this, because whatever action they take, it's very small relative to the power that the companies and governments have. But what we have seen is that when we work together as a community, we can actually make a tangible impact at an institutional scale. And I think this is an important message to send across, and for people to take action, not just in their own lives, but it has a contagious effect on the people around them, and advocacy effect, pushing companies to do better and pushing politicians to do better.
So what would you say were enabling policies that allowed the work you did to happen? And what would be enabling policies that would allow the scaling you're envisioning and just increasing the sustainability of this across all universities in Canada?
So there are two main things that I'd like to highlight on this. One is that it's really important for us to have evidence-based policy. And there's no way to do this if institutions and organizations don't measure, track, and report their data. And so the first step is to have government mandated regulations that all institutions, whether they're public institutions or private organizations, regularly measure, track, audit, and publicly report data. So if I reflect a little bit on my experience at Concordia, when a year into Waste Not, we wanted to collect data and to report as a community if their work is making any progress. And we quickly found out that the university didn't track its waste. And I just didn't understand this. How could my own research institution does not track data? And so I went in, was an intern, sat with a photocopier and scanned all the invoices that the university pays to the waste management company. And in the invoices will be per metric ton. And so that way we can get the data that we need. But these things, it's a public institution, and I don't understand why a public institution is not legally obliged to actually report its waste to societies that funds them. So first policy is get the data, and it helps with evidence-based policy at the university scale, at an institutional scale, but also we need to be able to compile all this data from different institutions, from different municipalities, different provinces, and look at them at the aggregate to be able to have nationwide evidence-based policy. And that also means that all this reporting and measuring has to be done in a standardized way. Because if everybody does things in their own way, it's a disaster. And I think we can already see this looking at COVID, of how at the beginning, different hospitals and different provinces had their own tracking system for COVID, but then you cannot make any national level decisions because the data is all over the place. So the first thing. Second thing, in terms of scalability, there's a lot of funding announcements that are coming out, especially around the climate and waste crisis. And I worry that a lot of it is trying to look for magic tricks. They're trying to find some sort of a fancy, sexy technology that's going to solve everything. And number one, this doesn't exist. Number two is that technology has a role to play for sure, but this is a fundamentally social problem. What we need to do is that we already know the solutions, and it's a lot of hard work, and we need to enable people to do that hard work.
So one of the things I wanted to know from you is, so Canada is leveraging education and innovation technologies to accelerate the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. How do you see your project contributing to this?
To give you an idea, so I mentioned we send waste ambassadors to events, and essentially we have a small team of paid waste ambassadors, so we pay everybody $15 an hour. And we send them to events organized by anybody. It doesn't matter. It could be the president organizing a fundraising event for alumni. It could be a professor organizing a conference. It could be students organizing a party. It does not matter. If you're organizing an event on campus and serving food, then we want to work with you. We ask you to make sure there's a accomplishment, and we send you waste ambassadors who stand next to the waste station, help people learn how to sort their waste. It's 30 seconds interactions. There's nothing glamorous about standing next to garbage bins, but it's super fun. But in just the academic year before COVID hit, so between August of 2019 and the shutdown in March, there were over 35,000 people who attended events where ambassadors are present. This is the equivalent of the entire undergraduate student population. And this is just this 1 year. We have been doing this since 2016. And so we do this day in and day out. So not just during orientation, it's not just a 1 week push. We do it throughout the year. Anytime anybody has an event, they send me an email, even the day before, we make it happen. So it's really about consistency and commitment to doing the actual work. And then the other thing that that's really important for me in terms of education activity is we do class presentations. And we do this very methodically. So we focus on common classes. So back when I was an engineering undergrad, like 100 years ago, every engineering student at Concordia had to take about 7-8 classes that are common between all departments, all programs. You could be studying mechanical engineering, or you could be studying civil engineering, it doesn't matter. But they all have to take those 7 classes. And we essentially pick one of those classes and present to it every time it's offered. And that way, over a couple of years, we reach the entire engineering population. And we've mapped this out throughout all of Concordia. And again, between August of 2019 and the shutdown in March, we present about 4,800 students using those waste sorting tutorials. And that's about 40% of average annual enrollment. Our goal is to get closer to 100%. Because we want to reach everybody at Concordia, and hopefully with a proper year and more planning, we can get closer to that. But what's really interesting is that because it's always the same professor teaching the same courses, we actually build really good relationships with the professors. And when the shutdown happened and everything had to transition online, even though it was a very stressful time, those professors were super committed and super collaborative with us. They allowed us to experiment, doing all those presentations on Zoom and helping students learn how to sort at home since campus is closed. And so we actually present to over 3,000 students via Zoom since the shutdown. So I'm super proud of the community's effort because it took the professors real commitment and being really responsive in a very stressful time, because they're committed to the cause, and even if their causes has nothing to do with waste in the climate.
One of the things I really find amazing about your project, I'm thinking of Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point, and what does it take to get to a tipping point? And in terms of the outreach strategy that you put in place, it's really amazing. And in more concrete terms, I've seen your presentations, pictures of what you do, and so I believe in composting. But for people who may not understand, how does composting contribute to sustainability in your own words?
So composting essentially is a way to turn food into fertilizers, organic waste into fertilizers. So it's leftover food and soil paper, and you turn that into fertilizers to bring those nutrients back to the soil. And so this helps in two ways. One is that right now, if you put your leftover food in the garbage and it goes to landfills, there's so much waste in landfills, there's actually not enough oxygen for that food to decompose properly back into its nutrients and CO2. Instead, it decomposes into methane. And methane is a greenhouse gas that traps 70 times more heat than CO2 over a 20-year period. And so that in itself emits a lot of greenhouse gas emissions and has a lot of impact on the climate crisis. And landfills are the fifth leading emitter of methane in Quebec as well. So it's a big problem from the climate crisis point of view. The other part is, since the way we're doing agriculture, we're producing so much food and we pump a lot of pesticides on the soil. So we're essentially taking a lot of nutrients away from the soil and sending back pesticides that kills the bioactivities in there. And those nutrients are not coming back to the soil, they're going to landfills. And what composting does is that it takes those nutrients back to the soil so that the soil can survive. And right now, I think the equivalent of 30 soccer field worth of soil that is killed, it degrades every single minute worldwide. And there was an article in Scientific American in 2014 that was saying that at this rate of soil degradation, we're going to run out of soil in 60 years. And that was 2014, right? So it's 53 years from now. So it's a massive problem. And the leftover food shouldn't go to landfill. It can be composted and those nutrients go back. The other part is that we waste 58% of the food we produce in Canada. We literally throw away more food than we eat. All while there's 1 in 7 Canadians that's food insecure. So none of this makes sense. And I think the first step is to buy only what you need, reduce your waste that way, finish your plate. And if you absolutely must, then you have to compost it. Yeah.
So what would you say are your key messages to people in Canada, especially youth, regarding mitigation for environmental damages and sustainability?
I think what I would like Canadians to know is that this is a Canadian problem. It's not a problem because some country in third world that is not taking care of its waste, or is emitting too much, or all these things. Canada generates the most waste per capita in the world. It's not China. We're literally tied with the United States. We're also the only country in the G20 whose greenhouse gas emissions have increased since signing the Paris Agreement. We generate 2.5 times more emissions per capita than China. And so this is a Canadian problem, and we need to take responsibility of that. We need to take ownership of that, and we need to act in our own lives and our own society. And yeah, sure, there's international work that needs to be done, but we need to start with ourselves as well.
Great point. I think this idea, for many people, they don't know that per capita, Canada has the most waste. That's a really important fact for people to be aware of. And also, Canada has very high ambitions towards 2030 in terms of protecting 30% of the land and reaching net zero by 2050. So are there any other things you'd like to share with our listeners before we finish?
It's urgent. This is an urgent problem. It helps, it feels like there's a lot of momentum when we talk a lot of plans that are going in 2050 or 2030. But one thing we need to keep in mind, and again, I don't want people to be alarmed. I want them to be alert, right? And so this is why I raise these points, is that there's a budget in terms of how much carbon we can possibly emit before we are locked into a 1.5 degree world. And right now, at the current emission rates, we would deplete that budget for 1.5 degrees in 7 years. So we don't have time to wait till 2030 or 2050. A lot of decisive actions have to happen right now. It's unfortunate, and scientists have been screaming about this for a long time. But right now it's time to act. And according to the IPCC report, this is the last decade to get our act together to avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis.
Thank you, Keroles. I think your project is really powerful in that it shows youth and everybody on campuses that we all, and at home, we all have our capacity for action, to contribute to making Canada a waste-conscious society where waste becomes fertilizer and allows us to replenish the nutrients in our soils. I think that's a really beautiful message. I love that not only is it social good, but also with the numbers and the metrics that you've analyzed, you've also found a way to make this into a profitable business, because we need green, profitable businesses across the country to create jobs and to ensure that what is a green economy is also an economy that builds prosperity for all. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking to you and all the knowledge you've shared with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elaine, and I'm very happy to have had this discussion.